Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast in which I, your host, sit down with people all across the tabletop, RPG, and surrounding space. That's the new one for me. Normally, I have a very set cadence for the intro, but I've surprised myself. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Bishkinskyi. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
No, I'm really good, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm great. I'm happy to be talking to you.
No, thank you so much for taking the time. So. You know what? I'll be honest. I was thinking a little bit about the intro because not only are you been something of a tabletop RPG writer, I'm gonna go in. You're the winner of the Dungeon Masters Challenge.
Yes, I'm the 2021 champion of the however many people they had as of recently, and I somehow won, which I have all the greatest thanks to the judges for, it was a fascinating experience and just something quite different, because usually as you know, the TTRPG space, it's a very cooperative space. It's not really a competitive space. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it was a competition was really interesting, although myself and other 9 finalists, most of us are in a Discord, and we've kind of formed all these like bonds, and just like everybody was really supportive of each other. So it's kind of, we turned it into cooperative even though it was competitive.
I must admit as well, I think hearing thanking the kind of judges, but I guess at the end of the day, the judges were kind of like evaluating the stuff you did. Like, it was kind of through the all the things you kind of put together. And it was, if I recall correctly, was it 8 weeks?
So there was the initial submission, which the open submission, mm-hmm. and then there were 7 weekly challenges, and then there was the final challenge. So yes, I guess it was 8 weeks. It was 8 challenges, and I think it was over like 10 weeks or something like that. So.
And again, I know you posted on Twitter that you received a very kind of immaculate trophy. You did say champion, and that again, to me, that always comes with like the idea of like a belt. Did you get that?
No, there's no belt. There's a hat and there is the Dungeon Master costume that they sent me based on a cartoon from the 80s or whatever. Yes,
Red Road.
I can dress up as a Dungeon Master now. But yes, the trophy says champion. So that's what I'm going to go with. And until such time as next year, somebody takes it off my hands.
No, well, I was saying, hopefully they do like a yearly different champion. They have like a hall of champions, and you're not gonna have to. I don't know, I don't know if they're expecting you to come back and like defend it, or just like.
Maybe it'll be like Survivor. Yeah, like in 10 years they'll gather all the champions. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I hope they do it again and more people have a chance to participate.
So I do have more questions, but I don't want to kind of get too far away, because you've been kind of involved within the kind of Adventure League scene for like a wee while. I guess kind of my first question is kind of like, how long ago did you kind of get your start?
Well, I started in RPGs in general. It must be like just about 6 years now. It's very difficult. I don't know if you have the same feeling, but it's very difficult to tell time now, because the last 2 years kind of didn't happen. Yeah. And the things that I think happened last year actually happened 3 years ago, because we kind of skipped 2 years.
Yeah.
There was a time jump.
Time is like wibbly wobbly. With that those last 2 gaps were like condensed to like, I think it's easy to count them as like half years.
Yes. About 5-6 years ago is when I started to play D&D. I never played as a kid or anything, or when I was growing up. And then I started and almost right away jumped into Adventurers League, because I have a day job that requires me to travel, and sort of I didn't have any friends who were playing D&D. So the fact that I could have the same character and kind of go place to place and continue building that character, through Adventurers League, and, play in any city I was in, play in different stores, play on whatever day of the week was convenient to me, because the different stores ran Adventurers League on different days. Yeah. So like that made it accessible to me, because regular home sort of D&D wasn't.
Yeah. That's no, I must say that's such like that's so cool. Like I imagine just the kind of the diversity of like DMs you get to kind of experience by going from like shop to shop. There's almost like I don't know, there feels like a challenge in there of like like going around like the states or around like a country and trying to like play in like an adventure league, almost around. So like as you were traveling, how many different like shops and stores do you think you like visited?
Well, I'm in Canada, so my travel is somewhat limited, but I've played sort of before I started going to conventions in the US and stuff like that. But in Canada, I must have played in maybe 10, 15 shops. Like, I do have the distinction. I did go when I went to Australia on vacation. I did find one night the Adventurers League shop that was running D&D in Sydney, and I went to play with random Australians just so I could say, hey, I played D&D on another continent. So
I've never thought of, I like all the times of like going on holiday and just like I can afford one evening to just pop in and wow. No, so basically I guess it's a combination of both you and the character you're playing with Adventure League are kind of quite well traveled.
Indeed.
So I guess wow. Then I guess the important part then is, so what was the kind of like transition from playing in Adventure League to like I want to start writing?
Well, I was running, in Adventurers League, I started DMing eventually, and you run, pre-written adventures. Mm-hmm. And some of them were great, and some of them were like, I can do better. And then I'm like, I probably should. I've always been interested in writing. I've done sort of more technical writing sort of for work, but I hadn't done creative writing since like university. I once wanted to be a writer, and then I looked at the reality of it and decided not to be one. Yeah. So I had studied a little bit of writing and did a little writing, creative writing in university and stuff, but I hadn't done anything since then. I've always wanted to. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, well, this is kind of an opportunity, and a huge, huge factor, because yours is a DMsGuild show. Mm-hmm. I have to say, the fact that the DMsGuild license essentially allows you to play with the Forgotten Realms mm-hmm. was a huge draw, because I was like, I can write in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
I can write about Drow that I grew up reading about, all the Salvatore novels.
Yeah.
I can do something with Drizzt if I wanted to, which I haven't, but I could if I want to.
Yeah, it's again, I think that's the biggest pull, like the ability of like, and I, in some fact that I always kind of like to say is the fact that like with the percentage, again, because the DMsGuild take a percentage, part of that is you kind of paying for the royalty, like sorry, the kind of the IP. So leverage it when you can. So was it a case of where kind of even before you were kind of playing the RPGs, the kind of the Forgotten Realms world as a whole was kind of like quite a big part of your, I guess, like early reading, young reading? Like at what age were you kind of reading?
Yeah, I think like when I was, I guess, teenager, maybe early 20s, I read through many of the Forgotten Realms novels, and then of course I played Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale, and then sort of throughout the years I got out of the reading the Forgotten Realms stuff, but I had checked out like Neverwinter and then the Neverwinter MMO, so I was sort of always familiar with the D&D idea. I just didn't know that, I mean, on some level I probably knew that there was an actual game behind it, but I never kind of consciously thought, oh, this is based on that game with the dice, because it just wasn't part of, I guess, mainstream culture or whatnot. So I just, like, when I saw Dungeons and Dragons, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like those books and those video games.
Yeah.
Like it never connected for me with.
I guess it is kind of weird how, like, again, like something like D&D can kind of be so, I guess, pervasive across multiple mediums, like again, all the book series, all the like the games, that it is quite easy, like unless you kind of like, see it all kind of everything kind of in one place, you'd be like, oh no, that's D&D, that's just a book series, isn't it? Although I think in this day and age, I think that's probably less common. We're going through a bit of a boom. But then, so I guess, so everything kind of culminated where you were just like, you know what, I've been DMing with like Adventure League, and I guess like again, a good amount of DMing is the kind of ability to kind of adjust and kind of tweak as kind of depending on and with the kind of, I guess the thing that I found about when it comes to like Adventure League is when I first kind of started writing, I used the Adventure League format to kind of like structure my adventures. Because it's so kind of clear and concise, and it kind of gets you to kind of focus on, okay, what is the most important part of like the adventures, and how can I kind of convey that? So I guess was the kind of, when you sat down and wrote your kind of like first Adventure League adventure, was it quite like an easy process for you, or was it quite challenging?
I mean, it was challenging in a variety of ways. The writing of it, I mean, maybe due to my ignorance at the time, or, you know, I didn't really know exactly what I was doing, or even probably remotely what I was doing. And so maybe because of that, I'm like, well, I'm just going to write it, and then we're going to see what happens, and then we're going to play test it, and then, you know, we'll see what happens. And if I need to fix it, I'll fix it.
Yeah.
And so, because at the time, the program I was writing for, which was the community created content program for AL, there was there was a 9-month lead time. There was like a whole bunch of complicated approvals. It's not like now, if you want to write a dungeon craft, you just pull off the template and you can write it and you can publish it tomorrow, as long as it. Back in those days, it was quite complicated. So between me sort of pitching the idea and having the first draft of my adventure to it hitting the guild was like a year and a half.
Yeah.
So and so I had lots of time to tweak things and lots of time to kind of learn other things. Actually, by the time my first adventure published, I had written a second one already.
In fact, that's kind of a useful kind of pipeline to kind of keep things going. But I get sometimes like there is a good amount of kind of like relief when you know that like a product is out there, it's done and dusted. The kind of, because I think as well with the CCC program, wasn't there a requirement that it had to be played at a convention?
Yes.
So,
and that was kind of to your question, which I'm coming a very roundabout way to answering, is so when I started DMing, I also started helping out with organizing. So I became friends with a lot of local organizers and stuff like that. And the one thing that we're always thinking about is like, how do we make our events better? How do we make our events bigger? And some of the things that you could do was get support from Adventurers League, and that support took various shapes, one of which was CCC, or the special exclusive adventures. And I said, well, I could write one of these. And, you know, I kind of pitched it to one of our administrators, and kind of it went from there. But like, for me, I wanted to write, but it also came out of like, well, this is a way to support our local events, right? Yeah. To make them better. So
I must admit, it's kind of nice, because again, it kind of, I guess, in a way of kind of giving back into like the Adventure League system, which you yourself have, you've gone around all over the place, kind of enjoying the like service. I don't know what to call like the adventure. Like, it's not like the
community.
Yeah, community. I think that's a better way. And to kind of realize like, let's try and, you know, give back in my own way. It's kind of it's heartfelt. So I take it what I kind of want to ask is like, when was the first time that you got to kind of, I guess, run one of your own kind of like Adventure League adventures at like a convention?
So it would have been about 3.5, 4 years ago. It was at a convention not too far from here. It was a fairly small convention. And just like there was maybe, I don't know, 10 tables of games being run, but I got to run there a few times. I had gone there the previous year, just like as a player. It was actually my first time going, because it was a little bit outside of town, and like, you know, a couple of hours outside of town. It was in a smaller city here in Ontario. And the first time I went there was my first trip to a convention, like with friends. And it was this very small kind of intimate almost event. And so the following year I said, well, you know, I can write something for you. And we figured it out, and I ended up running it there. And it was, you know, I guess that's kind of that's how the story began, right?
Yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
I did get my friend, whether he wanted to or not, I kind of volunteered him to run the playtest because from the very beginning, I was very concerned about, well, obviously I can run this, but can somebody who doesn't know anything about it run it? And I wanted that to be like the first test. So I wrote it and I said, hey, please, can you run this? And I said, don't tell anyone I wrote it. Tell them we're just doing a play test, and I'm going to be there and I'm going to say nothing. I'm just going to play.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So wait. So as in like just kind of watch, or as like one of the players?
I was there as one of the players, but I kind of didn't participate in any kind of meeting.
No, because I must admit, so that's something that I still really want to do. Like there's multiple. I feel like there's kind of like a hierarchy of like playtesting, where the first thing is like where you kind of run the adventure yourself, like you grab like your normal group and you sneak in like your content into the regular campaign, and then you kind of get. I feel like the next step is kind of like, you know, handing it off to kind of another kind of DM and kind of getting their feedback. But I don't know what it is. Just the idea of like sitting in on your own adventures. I feel like it's got to be like doubly stressful for like the DM. Just because like they're kind of essentially they're presenting your words. But then I guess I don't know. I feel like it's an interesting exercise as like a player, because you have to be that kind of like silent fifth of like, I'm not guiding anyone. I'm letting people do their own thing. I'm just here to go with the flow. I guess kind of like my question is like, yeah, what was it like being like a silent player in one of your own adventures?
It was hard. I mean, I had a very specific, like, you know, I knew for myself that I was there to take notes, and myself and the DM kind of talked about it, and I asked him, would you rather I just didn't show up and whatever, and he was okay with it. Yeah. So was my being there. I would not today subject anybody to that experience.
Really?
So like I would never ask somebody to run something with me at the table. I would just, you know, I run my own play tests, and, you know, I'll give it to somebody who can run it for their group and just give me feedback. I just think it creates maybe a little bit of awkwardness. And then at this point, people would know that because it wouldn't just be random people. It would be friends and stuff. They would know I wrote it. And so it would be different with me at the table, I think, for them, just like the feedback and whatever. And also for the DM, they always have the fallback where they can ask me. And I kind of want to take away the safety wheels, because if something is missing, I want them to tell me it's missing so I can fix it.
I guess the thing you got to think about, I suppose it's like I don't like the ideal like test conditions. Like when the adventure is out there in kind of the wild, unfortunately, you as the creator isn't going to be that sat there at the table to be like, actually, I think that's like they have a reaction or whatever the part of your adventure is. But I don't know. I guess like even maybe like further down the line, like once it's like released and kind of out in the wild for a long time, to just like, I don't know, rock up to a convention and just be like, I would like to play, and it's like, oh, we're playing my adventure. This is weird and spooky. Because so one thing I did want to kind of mention. So like looking at the kind of like your catalog, you've kind of done, what is it, like I think close to like 15 or so kind of like CCC adventures.
Yeah, there's quite a few. There's I think it's like 19 or 20. I may have lost count.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then one dungeon craft adventure. So yeah, I've written quite a few. Part of that is when I was writing my first adventure, because I was very committed to making it good, I wrote out 5 seasons worth of storyline.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Just like there's a background, there's a whole setting background, and then I basically worked out what would happen for the next 20 adventures.
Because that was going to be kind of like my follow-up kind of question, is because so with the kind of is Below the Moon Sea.
Yeah.
It's like, I think, was it up to 6 parts?
Yeah, so there's my first adventure was 6 Summoned Swords, which ended up being first in a trilogy, which I called Swords Below the Moonsea. So that was a trilogy, and that would have been like season 1. And then season 2 was Spies Below the Moonsea, which was 7 parts.
Okay, so like a complete like 10. So basically, so when you were sitting down writing the first kind of adventure, you kind of had the next kind of, at least the seeds for the next kind of 10 kind of planned out.
Yeah, I have, like I said, would have been 2, because I was thinking of them kind of as TV seasons. It's kind of, this is like the overarching storyline, and this is what I want to accomplish. This is kind of what's going to happen next. And this is what I needed to have all that for the first adventure, because I wanted to know like all the motivations of all the characters, and they all went into like branching paths. So beyond those 2, I have written out summaries for 3 more seasons worth of stuff. So
wow. So what? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Because I guess it's kind of that it's easy to kind of look at like Adventure League almost like episodic content.
Yeah,
because they kind of like neatly, again, it's, I guess you have you kind of have the thing where like each episode is its kind of contained experience, but it can be large of this kind of larger kind of arcing kind of like campaign. Did it not feel like when you were sitting down to kind of write your first like CC, were you never like, this feels a bit ambitious, like or
I mean, yes, but also it's like, I don't know, dream big or whatever.
Because
I very much wrote the first adventure in a way that like it has a proper ending. It concludes. It does not. It is not left open ended. It is beginning, middle, and full story. If all you ever play is 6 Summon Swords, you get a full, complete story. And then. It just, like I said, I needed it to flesh out the characters anyway.
Yes.
So it was kind of secondary whether I would actually get to write all the other stuff.
So then I guess, so when it comes to something like a Spies kind of Below the Moonsea, then that kind of like 7-part arc, what are like, I guess, some of the challenges in kind of having a story thread that kind of carries through these? Because again, as you kind of said, the intention is each one to kind of be their own kind of, again, they're contained adventure, but they themselves need to be bigger, like puzzle pieces of like a bigger kind of shape. What's that kind of like?
That was actually the biggest kind of challenge, because with Adventurers League in general, like there's been different things tried, whereas there've been adventures that are very tied closely together. Like you'll have a trilogy where if you play part 2, you're completely lost because you don't know what happens in part 1, and it doesn't really finish because the conclusion is in part 3. So with the Spy series, I very consciously went into it wanting to make each one of them an individual standalone adventure. So I essentially made it, and again, for better or worse, because there is no direct sort of beginning, middle, end storyline through the 3 of them. There are several storylines that kind of pick up and drop off, but it was all about I was introducing a new city, and it was a new drow city, which was quite different in how they do things, and that they allow other religions and things like that. It's somewhat more progressive. And what I decided to do to accomplish like having them all separate is to have each one focus on the players encountering one of the drow houses in the city. Each adventure is like you learn more about the city so you're doing your mission, you're doing your quest, whatever it is you do, but through that you encounter one of the different houses. And so that knowledge builds, and then there's kind of a couple of concluding adventures, and one of them is, there's a big ball where all the houses are present. So if you played the other ones, you know what all the houses are. But if you haven't, it doesn't really preclude you from playing because you can just learn.
I guess it's kind of the kind of way of looking at it, that it is just literally building up a player's kind of knowledge about a kind of location, and it kind of builds up. That's kind of I hadn't really kind of considered it a kind of that sort of application, but it's a nice and kind of fulfilling way to kind of, again, not leave any player joining in at like the fourth adventure and feeling like I have no idea who these, I'm trying to think of a Bane. I want to think of a good god. Lathander following, Drow. What's going on here? Where's our Loth fans at? But no. Also, so I guess the own. I guess I kind of want to ask a little bit as well. So, like, again, with how long you've been writing kind of for like Adventure League, you've seen the transition from CCC into kind of like Dungeon Craft, as well as kind of writing for some of the kind of like what is it? It was season 2 of the Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, so it was. I'm losing track of the seasons now. So it was season 9.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
it was the
second part of the season.
Yeah. Kind of. It was because the Adventures League seasons usually have like 10 to 20 adventures in them, and this was kind of the beginning of the storyline. So I had the, I guess, privilege or good luck of writing the adventure where the characters first encounter Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
It's called Stopped at the Gate because literally the adventure starts as you get to the gates of Baldur's Gate. So I kind of got to introduce Baldur's Gate, which was kind of nuts.
I was going to say, because so the funny thing is, so kind of before even coming to this, I went to at like I was playing like my local adventure league coming up to the release of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. Yeah. And funny enough, I've played through Stopped at the Gate.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because we had a little party. We did the kind of the prelude, which is just the kind of the murder at the kind of refugees escaping is it Eltergod?
Yes.
Yeah.
Elturel, sorry. So Elturel was the city. Elturgard is the region where the city is in. So they're both correct.
Yeah, that's not confusing at all. Like but yeah, the refugees from Elturel and also technically Elturgard, because they're all they kind of have that little murder in the camp, and then and so it was a case of like, wait a minute, I think there's a kind of connection there. But okay, so sorry, I'm sorry. I just wanted to that's like a tangent from because I wanted to say, so in kind of writing for the CCC, writing for kind of like official Adventure League, and then also now kind of doing a little bit of Dungeon Craft. I guess I'm just curious to see about like what are your thoughts about kind of working with, because it's still like within the same kind of, again, still within the bubble of Adventures League, but these are kind of like, again, 3 vastly different kind of approaches, I suppose.
They are, and I guess they can be, because with the CCCs, a lot depended on which convention you were writing for, because some convention organizers wanted to be very hands-on. They would give you an outline. They would say you have to write to this outline. You have to have my approval. And then, of course, there was all the AL approvals. And then some organizers just said, okay, you're writing, go off and write, and then I'll email it in for you because I'm the organizer. So you could potentially have a lot more individual freedom, which I did for most of mine. I've written some where I was given an outline, and I think they actually turned out to be some of my best adventures, oddly enough. Maybe my ideas aren't that great.
There's something kind of weird about like designing to like a constraint, and sometimes you end up being more creative because you have that kind of restriction.
100%, and I love. Maybe love is a strong word, but I love working with constraints. There are people who, especially, with the Adventurers League, as things have become more and more regimented, people are like, well, no, if I have to write, in the Feywild, I don't want to write anything. Well, it's like, you know what, like some of the greatest art in the world has been created to constraints, sometimes self-imposed by the artists.
Yeah.
So I think you can push your creativity in interesting ways if there is constraints.
But yes, so yes. Sorry, I was kind of like building on kind of from what you were kind of saying. Would you say that then you like, again, like if you could like go back to like the CCC way of things, or with the kind of like the path Dungeon Craft is on at the moment, do you kind of have a preference, or do you kind of like what they're doing with?
I think there are pros and cons to both programs. And I don't want to get into a lot of like AL politics and stuff like that. But the fact is, there was 9 months of various approvals for CCCs, and it wasn't sustainable either for the people who were working on it or for the folks at AL who had to approve. And, because as the program grew, they had like, hundreds and hundreds every year that they had to approve individually, and it just became kind of unmanageable.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a con, and it was a con for everyone. It was hard for them to do it. We ended up waiting as creators for months and months, and we didn't know if it was going to be approved. We didn't know if it was going to be published because we couldn't publish it ourselves. So all those things, all those barriers have been taken away with the Dungeon Craft program, because you have your requirements, and if you meet the requirements, you can put it up.
Yeah.
The thing that's been lost is a little bit of the freedom. Like, I was writing stuff that was set in the Underdark, so I can't continue that series. So if I want to finish it, it can't be AL, or I have to wait until there is a Wizards Underdark book and hope that there is a Dungeon Craft program that will let me write an Underdark again. There are some creative ways that you can kind of do some things with existing characters, but basically, I wrote a Dungeon Craft adventure called Ogre Crush, and it actually ties to some of my Drow adventures, but it can't really continue the story because the story was somewhere else.
So you're kind of hoping for like a sequel to Out of the Abyss, to like Return to the Abyss. Which, hey, that might work. I can definitely see, because you kind of have the kind of prompts with Dungeon Craft to kind of work through. But
for new creators, like in terms of being able to jump in and write your first adventure, Dungeon Craft, I think, is a fantastic way of doing it. It kind of guides you through the process. And I think the limits actually work in your favor, because especially, it's your first time author. It's like, oh my God, what do I do? Whereas here, it's like, here's some prompts, use one of them. Or if you want to be really creative, create your own domain of delight this year and, go that way. And you can do anything you want there. But it does give you some kind of riverbanks. And I think those are really useful for new folks. And like I said, as long as you meet the requirements, you can publish it yourself, and it's out there for people to play. Very easy. Like the gate's completely gone.
Which I think that's a really kind of, because again, I think I've spoken about like a bunch of times how like at least people within the insular, the DMsGuild community as well are quite, there's a number of kind of very fantastic people who are all about kind of like gates open, kind of like come on in, and it's kind of nice to see the kind of official Adventures League side of thing kind of doing the same side of things. Which actually does kind of segue me nicely, because I kind of wanted to, I guess, like approach like so we've spoken about Adventure League stuff. What about like some of your like more like general DMsGuild products and things?
So I've written a number of things. I've been trying to branch out a little more into DMsGuild and into other things. And it's difficult because DMsGuild's very saturated, and my audience has traditionally been on the AL side. And AL folks, they don't want to buy stuff that's not legal to play in AL because they can't use it. So I was fortunate enough to be invited to be part of the Across Eberron project, which was, and I got to write an Eberron adventure, which was my first Eberron adventure, and I think it was my first non-AL thing. So it really helped that that project had an audience of its own, and a lot of creators who were already prominent in the Eberron community and so forth. So I got to write that, and I got to write a few other things. I kind of started joining some of the compilations and things that come up. I've worked with Jeff Stevens for one of his compilations, and was Alan Tucker, I think, for one of his. There's been a few things that I've kind of jumped in and done. And then most recently, I've done another Eberron thing for Keith Baker's Dread Metrol setting. I wrote the adventure that's included in that.
Nice.
Which was also really cool. And so I've kind of started branching out, and then just over the last year or so, I've started doing some non-adventure stuff.
Ooh,
some mechanical things.
Yeah.
I had done monsters before, but this year I started doing some more mechanical stuff. I wrote a class I have props for this lovely product called the Rashomon Campaign Guide. I wrote the Witch Lauren full class with a couple of subclasses, which was a massively more difficult undertaking than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Because by this point I had written a bunch of subclasses, so I was like, oh, I'm fairly comfortable doing the subclasses. I kind of understand how it works. So a class is just a little more words. But no, the mechanical sort of brain power that you have to, I guess, expend to think about all the aspects of the class and like, will your class do things that other classes currently can't?
It's a tough one as well, because like building from it, like you need to kind of have the core class concept kind of needs to kind of carry itself, and then the kind of subclasses kind of need to kind of either like supplement or what was for the Rashomon Campaign Guide, what's the name of the class that you've designed?
It's the Witch Lauren full class. So the Witch Lauren, or the Witches of Rashomon, are kind of well known. Of course, Minsk, the famous ranger, was traveling away from his Witch Lauren, and they're mentioned a few times quite prominently. So they're essentially witches, and they're kind of the wise women of the land, and they're portrayed as wizard / druid / cleric / like whatever magic. Basically, if you need magic in Rashomon, you go to a Witch Lauren.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you could portray them as any of the existing classes, which is the way that Joe Russell, who produced Rashomon, he kind of chose to approach it that way, where the book offers you multiple ways to play a Witch Lauren. So you can play them as a sorcerer subclass, I think, or a wizard subclass.
Interesting. So it's almost like two classes in one, but with a kind of very rich kind of lore flavoring.
Yeah. And then I kind of came in when we were in the proposal phase, and I said, well, I have this idea for a full class for them, and I think I have a cool way of doing it. And, I kind of put in the proposal and they liked it. And so, we went with it. So you kind of have multiple ways of doing it.
So I must admit, I think they're like, I've always kind of said this about like adventure writing, that it is a kind of like really good way of kind of, I guess, like developing up skills in a little bit of everything. So because like throughout doing an adventure, you create your own monster to put into your adventure. Sometimes you create your own items. Sometimes as a stretch, you can like, there's a subclass to tie in with this adventure, which again is classes. On the other hand, again, it's rare when you're writing an adventure that you kind of need to design your own class. So I guess kind of like my question is, so what were the starting points for like coming up with your own class?
I think it was trying to figure out, I guess, everything that the class is not, which is all the other classes.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want it to be a different wizard. I don't want it to be a different sorcerer. So it was kind of like, what can I do that the other classes don't already have a niche for? And I don't, I can't say with 100% certainty I've accomplished it. I hope, I have. I've learned a lot. I think, if I ever get to do another one, I'll have some interesting learnings from this one. But yeah, I think I've come up kind of with a concept that kind of works, and I've tied that, as I try with everything, I've tied that to the lore of, because there was lots of lore in the Witch Lauren, but not so much mechanical stuff, although they had existed in past editions. So, but I just went to like, what kind of mechanics don't really exist? Yeah. And one of the things that I had in mind was this idea of like ongoing channeling, rather where you can literally channel power into your allies. And it worked really well because in the lore, there's all these ties where if you get severed from your witch Lauren, there's all these adverse effects.
So and it's kind of about maintaining that connection.
Yeah. So I thought, well, why don't we do something mechanical where they can do these things with the people that they're bonded with, and only the people that, and then if the bond breaks, there's negative effects and stuff like that. And it felt like something that's not really done by other classes.
No, interesting. Yeah, like that. Yeah, I kind of like that. But I do kind of want to like latch on, because you kind of mentioned how like if you were to approach a new class, there's like some things that you've kind of learned in the process. Do you mind, like, what would you say is like one of the top three?
I think really the most important thing, I kind of mentioned it, is just to think really hard about whether it needs to be a class.
So,
because if you think that it can work 90% well as a subclass of another class, don't make it its own class.
Yeah.
Like, because what's going to happen is once you make it its own class, now you have to make 3 subclasses. And those, or 2 you need to make at least 2 subclasses.
Yeah.
But but other people will want to make subclasses also. And if your class chassis, I guess, is not robust enough, then your subclasses aren't going to work. Because if your chassis is already very close to being a wizard or a barbarian or whatever, then when you start going to subclasses, they're just going to become more and more similar to what's already out there.
Yeah.
It's just really important to kind of eliminate all the things that other classes kind of do. And I mean, not things like, spellcasting, because there's already 6 classes.
Oh yeah. You can like share aspects, but it's like, okay, well, on like a base, like barbarians are always going to rage, or, it's like those kind of aspects of like the sorcerer's sorcery points, or, yeah, no, wow. It's kind of like, so I don't, again, wait, I have designed a class. I did it for curse classes. It was really bad that I've forgotten that I'd done that. But yeah, no, thankfully, like, at least with like curse classes and stuff like that, they are kind of working with like such kind of monstrous kind of origins that it's easy to kind of see where it's kind of differs from kind of, I think, like I did all about the like lost souls. So it's all like the idea of like your character in your own way is like something like you're trapped in like a suit of armor or like a golem, and that's kind of leads to kind of exciting stuff.
That's very cool.
Yeah, no, think about it. Again, same as you. Again, I like that. Again, I'm much like you. I'm kind of fascinated with the kind of weaving in lore, and that's why approaching things like Eberron is always kind of like, again, people who are fans of Eberron are like diehard fans of Eberron.
Yes.
But it's almost like quite daunting, like stepping out of the Forgotten Realms, which is a world that I kind of, at this point, I know, like, I know like I know the Sword Coast, but there's kind of all the kind of other section where it's just like there's so different that it's kind of like you want to do these other kind of settings kind of justice.
The thing about Eberron people, if I may, if you let them, they will help you. Like, genuinely,
like the biggest concern I have about like writing Eberron content is just not wanting to leave. Like they I don't know what it is. Eberron fans, they entice you in. They're so kind. And yeah. But I kind of wanted to ask more generally though about kind of like everything that you've done. When it kind of like comes to like your creative process, would you say you have like a favorite and kind of like least favorite part?
I've thought about this because I don't know if I have a single favorite part, because there is so much about the creative process that I just absolutely love doing. I mean, for me, story is always kind of the king of things, but I love the process of working out the kinks in the story. Like the specifics, like, it's very easy. I want to be hesitant to say easy, but it's fairly easy to come up with idea for a clever story.
Yeah.
But then when you actually get into the nitty gritty of it, it's like, well, why does this, I don't know, lich, why have they decided to build a dungeon?
Yeah.
Why are they just sitting there?
It's always the case of like the story has to kind of mesh within the system, again, and working about like how, within the world of 5e, how that all works. And then how does a story, survive knowing that there's going to be player involvement? And that those are essentially like the two big checks of like, okay, Lich has a dungeon for whatever reason, what it is. What weird magic stuff have they got going on that kind of, kickstarts the story to kind of get everything in line?
To me, it's just like I have I have an adventure where, the players are assaulting a castle or a mansion or something.
Yeah.
And there's a trap in the floor. One of the tiles is trapped. Well, before I write that, I have to work out in my mind, why would somebody have a trapped tile in their own house?
Yeah.
Because I'm actually genuinely interested in that, because that opens up, I think, interesting opportunities for creativity, right? Because I don't want to just say, well, there's a trap tile and there's no explanation, because people I would not want there to be a trap tile in my corridor when I come home.
Yeah.
Because my guests would trip it, and probably one night drunk, I would trip it.
If it worked well, if you're in your a goblin den or a kobold, they just put those, but on next to your front door, it doesn't quite work in the same sense. And you kind of don't want that moment of the moment where the players are just what's going on? This shouldn't be here. This just feels like a trap for trap's sake.
So that's definitely one of my favorite. And the other part that I absolutely love is talking to absolutely anybody who has seen, played, or run my adventure. I love getting the first draft back from the editor, because, and I know a lot of people probably hate getting the first draft from that. I love getting the first draft because somebody consciously read my thing. And they have things to say about it. That's awesome. I love if with AL your adventures get run at a con, I try to go around and talk to the DMs, how did it go, what happened, what went wrong, what can I do better. I love talking to players. Oh, you played it, how did it go? Kind of just getting that firsthand. Somebody it's a collaborative game, and I think from a designer writer kind of standpoint, we kind of forget that when we write something, we are collaborating with every person who will ever run it and play it.
I just adding on to that buzz of just because again, it is easy to think about you're just kind of almost, if sometimes it's I'm writing this for myself, and in kind of weird way, and then you kind of have to oh no, there's someone on the other end, and every now and then when you get I don't know, someone tweeting you going, hey, I just played your adventure, you're oh my god, they're actually there's people using this thing that I made that I wasn't anticipating. It's good. It's a constant drip feed of the warm fuzzies.
They're not always warm and fuzzy, but yes.
Okay, in touch with when the feedback's nice and people are having a good time.
You have to take it either way, I think.
No, as long as as long as the feedback you're given is constructive and not just I did not like it. There was a trap in the guy's front door.
I've and I mean, I think it depends on you as a person. Or anybody as a creator, kind of how they take stuff. I'm very easy around people's negative feedback. Somebody once posted on a Facebook group that that my adventure was the worst adventure in history of adventures. And actually, I said, hey, message me if you want to tell me why. And I ended up talking for 45 minutes on Facebook with this person who, I don't think I changed their mind about anything, but they told me why they absolutely hated my adventure. And they might be right, they might be wrong, or like I said, but if I don't try to find out why they hated it, I know with 100% certainty I will not learn anything. If I do try to find out and they're just saying, oh man, it just sucks, bro. Okay, maybe I won't learn anything, but but maybe I will.
No, I think again, I think that's again. It's quite a difficult there's I guess there's tiers and almost nuance to it, but being able to kind of kind of detach yourself almost emotionally to be I just need to kind of work out if there is a some feedback here which is actionable and I can kind of take away and kind of improve the thing, versus again, because like D&D at the end of the day is like, unfortunately, even as adventure writers and stuff like that, you can't guarantee how the dungeon master is going to run it. You can't guarantee the party composition. Playtesting again can kind of allow you to kind of catch the any kind of like sweeping major errors or like plot points and bits and bobs. But chances are it may never be played exactly in the same way, and that's why it's 50-50. Like again, I don't really know where I'm going, but it's a case of like
I think what you're getting at is like at least the way it's the way I see it is the person had the experience that they had.
Yeah.
And if their experience was your adventure sucks, you're not going to change the experience they had.
Yeah, you can't.
You can try to find out why they had it.
Yeah.
And then you can say, you know what? It wasn't a result of my adventure. It was a result of their expectations. It was a result of their DM. But if you argue with the person and saying, well, you weren't supposed to have that experience.
No, yeah, you can't argue with someone's lived experience.
Take what's there, and if it's useless to you, throw it out and move on.
Yeah. So then I guess that kind of segues nicely, because the other side of the coin being kind of like your least favorite part of the process. It seems like, again, by kind of your own words, that you're quite happy with the kind of the feedback and the kind of like that kind of. Or is that, again, I don't know if that kind of factors into like what you maybe don't like so much about.
This one I have a very easy, very short answer. Promotion. I hate it. I like when it's done. And I like my actual like education. I have a marketing degree, and I know everything that needs to be done for promotion, and I do exactly 5% of it because I just can't, like, personality wise stand doing it.
I think the thing that always gets me about promotion is the fact that it technically is endless.
Yes,
like you like realistically you never really should, like, again, if you want to like do the best, you never really should be done advertising anything, but it's, I don't know, it's draining and it's kind of keeping up.
It feels so self-serving. It's like, buy my things, and it's like, I don't want to be the one saying it. Somebody else should sell my thing.
This is where we create like an elaborate system in which two designers just promote each other's work, and then maybe there's some logic in that. So then I guess kind of to kind of round off like your kind of design process as a whole, then I guess I'm gonna like I'm gonna pin these questions together in talking about like what is something, I guess, what would you say is like a highlight or like a design choice that you're quite proud of? And then again, I love the coin analogy. On the other side of the coin, what is like a lesson that you've kind of learned overall that kind of, were you, I don't know, I hate to say like, were you to start over again? Because again, the lessons are kind of part of the process. But, what's one of the biggest things you can kind of point to and, say that like, this has been a big lesson?
So in terms of things that I guess that I'm proud of in terms of design choices is, for me, the story is always the foremost part of the design choice.
Yeah.
And I can actually, if we keep going with the coin analogy,
by all means,
the flip side of it is that not everybody wants that, and that's okay. Because again, the learning is not everybody is going to like your style or your work. And if you try to make your work kind of for everybody, it becomes for nobody. So it's like, I found kind of what I think is, my style or my niche, or the things kind of like that I do well and that I present well. And then people walk away from adventure saying, oh, this was really good. I really like the storyline. I really like the characters, etc. Whereas if I try to make it about something else, I don't know what they'll walk away with. So I'd rather there be fewer people walking away with really good experiences, that like, I guess a larger number was walking away kind of going meh.
Yeah. So. I guess it is that kind of like that honest discussion towards like the start of the project, which is just like, who am I aiming this for? Or like what is the essence that I want to kind of capture? And yeah, Yeah, I think I can definitely understand like the innate feeling because like I don't know, I like me personally, I'm a person pleaser. I don't like the idea of like releasing something that people don't like, but it's the kind of harsh reality that like I don't know, like take my Volo's Guide to Getting Murdered. Not everyone really wants to kill Volo. Not everyone's up for like, you know, a tongue-in-cheek murder mystery. It's its own niche, and that's fine. And you know, sometimes it's good to kind of lean into that and make it, you know, I guess like a more kind of like a more truest, you know, rendition of itself than going, maybe, you know, maybe it shouldn't be Volo, maybe it should be Keith. I don't know to pull the name out of my hat. But yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. Yeah, well then, yeah. So I this has been a bit of a long journey, but I have one or two more
Sure.
Dungeon Master Challenge questions, which I feel from the introduction to here is a journey. But I've got like a segue, which is like,
Sure.
so from Adventure League writing, from you know class designing, from everything to the Dungeon Master Challenge champion. How has that kind of like I guess that journey be? Was those 8 weeks of you know week by week challenges? Was it like a rush? Was it like what were there any like challenges that stood out?
Yeah, it was absolutely a rush, and not just because I was in a rush most of the time, because it was a timed thing, but it was very exciting to kind of be asked to do things. There were things I was asked to do that I never done. Like we were asked for one of the challenges to design a hazard. Forget designing a hazard. I don't think I've ever even run a hazard aside from like yellow mold. Like I'm like, how am I gonna make new yellow mold? It's just like it's just not that interesting.
Yellow worm mold.
And then I'm like, well, I don't like hazards. I don't use hazards. You know, I don't think the hazards that exist are particularly exciting. But at the end of the day, 72 hours later, I have to produce a really exciting hazard. So it's kind of sit down and find a way to be excited about it and make it exciting, you know?
So was it like essentially like I guess like a condensed experience, like a design experience of like you have to go from like in 72 hours, go from I have this idea to like turning it into reality that you kind of, I guess you have to kind of have that kind of like, I'm just going to commit to this.
Or... Yeah, you definitely have to commit at some point. I think, and my process was kind of like spend the first 24 hours coming up with ideas, kind of refining what I want to do, and then kind of then do a draft and then kind of do the editing because you were doing your own editing and everything. So, and I think only once throughout out of the 7 challenges did I go through the first 24 hours and kind of come up with the idea and then change what I was going to do. Because for the most part, kind of, and that's generally it's kind of the same process for me for adventures. I drive a lot for work. Sorry, this is a tangent, but it's going somewhere.
No, it's like the shower thoughts, or just like when you're just like mind is wandering.
Yeah, but I'll spend hours upon hours kind of working through the story beats, working through kind of ABC, putting things kind of like, you know, imagining gears coming together in your mind. And then when I get to actually sitting down and writing it, it's almost like filling in the blanks because like all the headings are there for me because I've already come up with what happens and how it happens and why it happens. So it's just a matter of like explaining that to the DM.
Again, it kind of mimics my own writing style of like I'm a big fan of all those kind of headers and just kind of filling. And the kind of I found I really like writing on like a train. Like those, I don't know what it is, but just like those kind of spaces where you almost you can't do anything else other than kind of immerse yourself like in the kind of like design, like working out like what's wrong with this design or kind of what's the story here. But it's not the most cost effective to just constantly hop on trains when I don't need to be going anywhere.
Yeah, but I think that's why so many people, you know, the cliche is, you know, the writing in the coffee shop. But I think that's why so many people do that is because it puts you into that space of you're physically in a space for doing only the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you're at home, you can do any number of 1,000 things, right? It just makes it easier to focus.
So my only last question then is out of the kind of all the challenges, which would you say was your personal favorite?
I really like doing the drag. I guess they had the villain challenge, and mine was a dragon, which I can't talk about, but which will come out because it's still under an NDA, I think, until it's published. But
I guess
they talked about it a little bit. So, but basically, I came up with a dragon, and one of the challenges of the contest was to come up with. It had to be good enough for level 3 characters for the final challenge.
Okay.
But when you're coming up with like a villain, capital V, having them defeatable by level 3 characters doesn't always work.
No.
So I ended up doing something clever, which was actually inspired by the fact that there is an upcoming dragon book. But I just thought, well, why don't I say that it's a dragon type and you can use any of the dragon templates. So you can make him as a young dragon, or you can make it as a old dragon, or you can make it as an ancient dragon.
And it all kind of scales.
Like I kind of cheated on the cheated maybe is the wrong word. Kind of got around the restriction of having it be by level 3 by saying that if you encounter it as a wormling, this is what happens. But you can also encounter it as an older dragon. And, I think it's a very cool dragon.
No, I was going to say, I kind of leads into nicely because what you're talking about, like, story kind of being paramount. And that's kind of, again, the villain kind of needs a motivation. It kind of needs that kind of like all those kind of justification of like, why are they a villain? Do they consider themselves a villain? All those kind of things. So kind of, hearing you kind of say it kind of like, it makes sense why that kind of like stands out.
And actually, come to think of it, because you had asked me, how when writing my first adventure, how come I wrote out so much? So when I was creating the villain, I ended up writing out the level 1 to level 20 storyline of what could happen in my domain of delight.
Yeah.
Because if you encounter this dragon at different ages, something else is happening in the domain. Yeah. So quite literally, if I wanted to sit down and write a hardcover 1 to 20 adventure for the domain, I kind of already have the framework.
No, and I guess an ancient dragon may want slightly different things from like a little whelp. they might not have the same ambitions.
Right.
Well, no, I guess it kind of the challenge is like as a whole is kind of like a nice segue, because there was a huge kind of like community kind of rally about it, kind of tying it to the D&D celebrations event. But I guess kind of looking at the community as a whole, who kind of like, I guess, like stands out as like a source of inspiration?
A source of inspiration for me is Will Doyle, who is a notable designer, most notable recently as him and Stacy wrote the Wild Beyond the Witchlight book. But I got to know his work through actually Adventurers League, because he wrote, like almost every year, he wrote an adventure for Adventurers League, and he wrote some of the epic adventures. Wow. Which the thing that I find like really amazing in his work is that, first of all, it doesn't repeat. It's always doing something new and different, and trying to do different mechanics, and trying to bring in things that are not necessarily in D&D. And for me to see kind of an established designer who is doing these completely like super creative, outside the mold things, and succeeding in doing it, like that's inspiring to me, because to me it's like, oh, you can actually be really creative and really out of the box and still be successful. And like anything else, I like, there's stuff of his that some of which I didn't like, but even the stuff I didn't like is incredibly creative, and I'm like, oh my god, like for the people who like this, they're gonna love this.
It's nice because know that there's still kind of like design voids and space that, again, the system as a whole can kind of build into and kind of keep kind of, I guess, like innovating, and just kind of like, again, still have those range of like, again, emotional range of experiences, again, going from like a no combat adventure, or all these kind of approaches. Andrew, I must admit, looking at the time, we've done it. We've managed to kind of natter our way through an hour. But I don't want to leave before hearing some of the cool stuff that you're currently working on. And again, for the people at home, where they can stay up to date and hear all about your work.
You can find me on Twitter, handle @JaysandDragons. That's with the letter N, not with an and.
There'll be a link in the description as well.
There'll be a link in the description. I have a card website, which is toweringtales.card.co. There will be a link in the description.
There will be a link in the description.
That's probably the best way to actually find all the stuff I've done, because all of it is there and it's kind of all in one page, which is very easy to look at. I'm actually not actively working on anything. I've had between the DM challenge and having a really busy kind of I had a very front-loaded year. I worked on a Kickstarter, which I was the lead designer on, called Den of Assassins, which we kickstarted in July and just delivered.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the work was done with that, and it'll be available in drive-through sometime in the next couple of months. And I worked on the Rashomon book for Joe, and I worked on a Dread Metrol adventure. So like I had done all these things kind of ahead of time, which is still trickling out. So, and then of course the DM challenge took up a couple of months, and then I had some work stuff. So
as I say, some much deserved rest, I think it sounds like.
Yeah, and so the last thing I have coming out this year, I think, is I wrote an adventure called Red Masks for Gamehall Con, which premiered there, which is another Adventurers League adventure. So that should be out sometime within the next couple of months. And then, of course, Wizards will be putting out our contest work at some point, hopefully soon.
Nice.
So,
dude, it's really exciting to hear like all this kind of stuff coming out. And yeah, I mean, it's weird to think that 2021 is just kind of, well, 2022 is just around the corner. It's the weird year smash.
So I'm trying to actually actively figure out kind of what I'm going to do next, because I have about 20 ideas and kind of need to narrow it down, and probably won't get started until next year, because I kind of did want to take a conscious break.
Nice. Refresh the batteries and all that. Yeah. But no, honestly, Andrew, thank you so much. This has been, I get a little bit selfish anytime there's like a fellow adventure writer where I'm just like, I just need to ask all the questions about how you write adventures, just because I want to know. But no, honestly, yeah, I will extend a thank you for joining me. I hope you had a semi all right time.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And it's been great chatting with you, and I appreciate you asking me to come on.
Thank you. And then, in closing, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. I am a DMsGuild Herald. And I think at the start of this video, I've inserted a little clip to explain what that means. But be sure to check out more information in the description if you're curious. Otherwise, it's my favorite and my final question, which is, Andrew, how do you end a podcast?
Okay. How do we end the podcast? I can't drop the mic because I don't want to break it.
Do you want me to just, I'll just spin mine?
Yeah. See, you've got a swinging one. Mine would actually fall off the desk. So let's try this and hope I don't fall out of my chair. So that's how we end the podcast.